Why do we hiccup? Slow version. Charles Osborne began to hiccup in 1922 after a hall fart on a town hall. He wasn't cured until 68 years later, and is now listed by Guinness as the world record holder for hiccup longevity. Meanwhile, Florentine Jennifer Mead may hold the record for the most frequent hiccups, 50 times per minute, for more than 4 weeks in 2007. So, what causes hiccups? Doctors point out that a round of hiccups often followed from stimuli that stretch the stomach, like swallowing air or too rapid eating or drinking. Others associate hiccups with intense emotions or a response to them, laughing, sobbing, and anxiety and excitement. Let's look at what happens when we hiccup. It begins with an involuntary spasm or sudden contraction of the diaphragm, the large dome-shaped muscle below our lungs that we use to inhale air. This is followed almost immediately by the sudden closure of the vocal cords and the opening between them, which is called the glottis. The movement of diaphragm initiates the sudden intake of air, but the closure of the vocal cords stops it from entering the windpipe and reaching the lungs. It also creates the characteristic sounds. To dig, there is no known functions for hiccups. They don't seem to provide any medical or physiological advantage. Lie began to inhale air, only to suddenly stop it from actually entering the lungs. Anatomical structure or physiological mechanisms with no apparent purpose present challenges to evolution biologists. Do such structures serve some hidden function that hasn't yet discovered? Or are they relics of our evolutionary past, having once served some important purpose, only to persist into the present as a vestigial remnant? One idea is that hiccup began many millions of years before the appearance of humans. The lung is thought to evolve as a structure to allow the early fish, many of which live in warm, stagnant water with little oxygen, to take advantage of the abundant oxygen in the air overhead. When descendants of these animals later moved onto the land, they moved from gill-based ventilation to air breathing with lungs. That's similar to the much more rapid changes faced by frog today, as they transition from tadpoles with gills to adults with lungs. This hypothesis suggests that hiccup is a relic of the ancient transition from water to land, an inhalation that could move water over gills, followed by a rapid closure of glottis preventing water from entering the lungs. That's supported by evidence which suggests that the neuron patterns involved in generating a hiccup is almost identical to that responsible for rapid respiration in amphibians. Another group of scientists believe that the reflex is retained in use today because it actually provides an important advantage. They point out that true hiccups are found only in mammals, and they are not retained in birds, lizards, turtles, or any other exclusively air-breathing animals. Further, hiccups appear in human babies long before birth, and are far more common in infants than adults. Their explanation for this involves the uniquely mammalian activity of nursing. The ancient hiccup reflex may have been adapted by mammals to help remove air from the stomach as a sort of global bird. The sudden expansion of the diaphragm would raise air from the stomach, while the closure of bladders will prevent milk from entering the lung. Sometimes a bite of hiccups will go on, and we try some remedies. Sipping continuously from a glass of cold water, holding one's breath, a mouse of honey or peanut butter, breathing into a paper bag, or being suddenly friendly. Unfortunately, scientists have yet to verify that any one cure works better or more consistently than others. However, we do know one thing that definitely doesn't work. One more with normal speed. Charles Urbans began to hiccup in 1922 after a hawk fell on the top of them. He wasn't cured until 68 years later, and is now listed by Guinness as the world record holder. Hiccup longevity. Meanwhile, Florida teen Jennifer Min may hold the record for the most frequent hiccups, 50 times per minute for more than 4 weeks in 2007. So, what causes hiccups? Doctors point out the round of hiccups often follow the stimuli that stretch the stomach, like swallowing air or too rapid eating or drinking. Others associate hiccup with intense emotions or a response to them, rapping, sobbing, anxiety, and excitement. Let's look at what happens when a hiccup. It begins with an involuntary pattern or sudden contraction of the diaphragm, the large stomach muscle below our lungs that used to inhale air. This is followed almost immediately by the sudden closure of our vocal cords and the opening between them, which is called the glottis. The movements of diaphragm initiates a sudden intake of air, but the closure of the vocal cords stops it from entering the windpipe and reaching the lungs. They also create the characteristic sound hic. To date, there is no known function for hiccups. They don't seem to provide any medical or physiological advantage. Why begin inhale air only to suddenly stop it from actually entering the lungs? Anatomical structure or physiological mechanisms with no apparent purpose present challenges to evolutionary biologists. Disaster structures were some hidden function that has not been discovered? Or are they relics of our evolutionary past, having once served one important purpose only persist into the present as a vestigial remnant? One idea is that hiccup began many millions of years before the appearance of humans. The lung is thought to have evolved as a structure allowed early fish, many of which live in warm, stagnant water with low oxygen to take advantage of abundant oxygen in the air overhead. When descendants these animals later moved onto land, they moved from gill-based ventilation to air breathing with lungs. That's similar to the much more rapid changes faced by frogs today, as they transition from tadpoles with gills to adults with lungs. This hypothesis suggests that hiccup is a relic of ancient transition from water to land. An inhalation that could move water over gills, followed by rapid closure of a bladder preventing water from entering the lungs. That's supported by evidence which suggests that neural patterning involved in generating a hiccup is almost identical to that responsible for respiration in amphibians. Another group of scientists believe that the reflux retain an today because it actually provides an important advantage. They point out that true hiccups are found only in mammals, and that they are not retained in birds, lizards, turtles, or any other exclusive air-breathing animals. Further, hiccups appear in human babies long before birth, and are far more common in infants than adults. The explanation for this involved its unique human activity of nursing. The anxious hiccup reflex may be adapted by mammals to help remove air from the stomach as a sort of clarifier bird. The sudden inspection of the diaphragm would raise air from the stomach, while the closure of the bladder would prevent milk from entering the lungs. Sometimes the bumble hiccup will go on, and we try reminisce, sipping continuously from a glass of cold water, holding one's breath, a mouth of honey or peanut butter, breathing into the paste bag or being suddenly frightening. Unfortunately, scientists have no need to verify if one of one cure work better or more consistently than others. However, we do know one thing that definitely does work.